right? Jeremiah 8. God is, maybe in the comment section, help me find a synonym for amazing, especially if you're tired of me saying that God is amazing. It's still true, but I could possibly buy another word for it. So if you got any suggestions, help me out. But in the meantime, let's talk about Jeremiah 8 from the perspective of they know not. Let's use that as a title in this chapter that once again is going to talk about the pending destruction for Judah. This time talking about the why in the form of a number of questions, mostly from God, but one from the people, helping to, at least as I see it, structure the chapter. After the first 3 verses talk about the ways in which the bones of the kings, the officials, the priests, the prophets, and the inhabitants of the city are going to be scattered like dung, reminding me of the way in which Ahab's wife, Jezebel, was consumed by dogs when she died so that she could not be buried, but she was scattered essentially by the dogs in the form of dung across the land. The reason for the people of Judah finding what seems to be a similar fate, as we said, may become clear in the why questions that follow. The first set coming in verses 4 through 7, when verse 4 will say, when men fall, do they not rise again? If one turns away, does he not return? Verse 5 saying, though, why then has this people turned away in perpetual backsliding? Going on in verse 7 to say, even the stork in the heavens knows her times, and the turtle dove, swallow, and crane keep the time of their coming. But my people know not, that's the title, the rules of the Lord. Once again, going back to the whole concept of a distance has grown between God and the people. And the thing that he is going to help add to that discussion that we've seen before this time is the fact that they seem to think they are close to God. Not that that's new, but I never really looked at it this way, because in verses 8 through 12, he's going to talk about the way in which they're going to say, it says, how can you say we are wise and the law of the Lord is with us? Behold, the lying pen of the scribes has made it into a lie. Basically helping us to understand that they have been studying. It's not so much that they have been neglecting the law of the Lord, but they have become fixated on the version of it that they had developed, similar to what we saw in the way in which they created an entirely new narrative of God around their idols. Here, they're growing a little bit closer to God, creating their own narrative around his word that isn't exactly what he said. And so understanding that, he has grown angry because they have grown distant, because the thing that they're studying ain't what he told them. Understanding that there is once again a practical side to the things that he was telling them, because the things that he was telling them would lead to a certain level of productivity, and the version of what he had told them that they adopted rendered them unproductive, which is what we see him telling them in verse 13. Verses 14 through 17, talking about the ways in which they realize that their condemnation is now inevitable, leading them to ask in verse 14, why do we sit still? Gather together, let us go into the fortified cities and perish there. To which God is going to respond, no, it's actually going to be okay. No, he doesn't say that. He actually doesn't have a whole lot of good news for them, because in verse 17, he's going to say, for behold, I am sending among you serpents, adders that cannot be charmed, and they shall bite you, declares the Lord. Understanding that even though the word is generally described as good news, it does have limits. Jeremiah chapter 8 really being a picture of what the Christ himself came to preach, which is good news that does have limits. Understanding that he fulfilled the old law, but not replacing it with no law whatsoever. He replaced it with the law of Christ, which has the limits that he as God is allowed to set. But in Jeremiah chapter 8, he's going to go on in verses 18 through the end of the chapter to pose the final 2 questions. Think in verses 18 through 21. I saw it being summed up in verse 19, where he says, why have they provoked me to anger with their carved images and with their foreign idols? Understanding that his why is, at this point, now that there is a point of no return, why did it have to get this far? As the chapter will conclude in verse 21 with the final question, is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then has the health of the daughter of my people not been restored? The tragedy seeming to be that the cure was there all along, untouched and apparently lowly regarded. That lowly regarded part, in some ways, reminding me of the way in which Isaiah chapter 50, 52, and 53 describe the Christ, understanding that even when God came to live among us, he was lowly regarded, even though he had the cure for everything that Israel needed, not only in the first century, but the cure for everything that we really need right now. The thing that separates us from that cure now quite possibly might be the exact same thing that separated them from that cure back then. The lying pen that offers us an alternative version of God, which leaves us without ever genuinely knowing God, and moreover, renders us unproductive in accomplishing the things that he has actually created us to do.